Kate Rogers has the details at Starbucks.
Hey there, Morgan. That's right. We do have some breaking news on Starbucks. Howard Schultz will be stepping down from the Starbucks board of directors effective today as part of a planned transition, the company says. Schultz stepped down as CEO of the coffee giant in March as Laxman Narasimhan took the reins. He had most recently served as chairman emeritus and director. Starbucks is also announcing the election of Wei Zhang to the company's board, adding a 9th seat. Zhang most recently served as a senior advisor to Alibaba Group and president of Alibaba Pictures Group. That experience key here because China remains a very important market for Starbucks. It is its second home market with more than 6,000 locations today. Now, reflecting on his 41 years with the company, Schultz said in a statement, quote, "I am enormously blessed to have experienced this journey from the ground floor at the company these many years. I look forward to supporting this next generation of leaders to steward Starbucks into the future as a customer, supporter, and advocate in my role as chairman emeritus." Schultz returned to Starbucks, remember, for a third stint as CEO after Kevin Johnson retired in 2022, but had said this would be short-lived and he would not be back after this one. So it looks as though he is fully stepping away from the company that he has been with for more than 40 years. So certainly end of an era here. Remember, he came back as the union back and forth was really ramping up. Was key in that, was key in search for this new CEO in Laxman Narasimhan, who's been, leading the reins of the company since this spring. So certainly a huge transition for Starbucks, guys. Back over to you.
A huge transition, but you said a planned transition, and it sounds like it's coming 6
That's
months
right.
like clockwork after the CEO succession. I'm just curious, though, it's been a revolving door in terms of chief executive role for Schultz. But this is his baby, Starbucks. Has he been on the board straight through?
I believe so, Morgan, but everyone had been talking about, would he really step away this time? Because remember, as we said, third time coming back. He was in charge before Kevin Johnson came on. Then he came back to lead as Johnson stepped away. So there's been certainly, as you said, kind of a revolving door, a lot of back and forth. He has kind of been the steady hand the entire time. So certainly now saying he's kind of stepping into retirement, going to focus on his Schultz Family Foundation, his wife, some of the entrepreneurial work that they do with that foundation. And, of course, will always, I think, very much care for and be involved in his own way with Starbucks, but now stepping away from the board. So a very different role here.
Okay.
Kate, I'm looking at the chart, and Starbucks is pretty much trading where it was 4 years ago in the summer of 2019. What's the big challenge for leadership post-Schultz? What's the problem they've got to solve?
John, it's a great question. So sales in the U.S. in the most recent quarter were still strong, but they were a little bit softer than anticipated. China, we saw a huge bounce back, but that market, as I said, second home market, it has had, quite a few hits over the last few years with COVID and the lockdowns experience there. It's a huge business segment for them. Same-store sales, if I'm recalling correctly, were up more than 40% in the most recent quarter. So that market will be key. U.S. market, of course, key. Changing consumer dynamics, how much consumers want to spend on coffee, seems to still be very strong here in the U.S. And you can't forget about the union battle and back and forth. It's certainly a smaller piece of the puzzle, but that's not going away, right? And that's an issue that Schultz was kind of brought back into, I think, work on. Remember, he testified before Congress about that union back and forth. When he came back, Bernie Sanders had him up on Capitol Hill to talk about what was going on with that. So I think we can't forget about that. It is an important piece of the story, too.
Okay. Kate Rogers, thank you. Shares are trading lower right now. Let's bring in Nick Setyan from Wedbush for reaction as the stock does pull back on this news. Nick, do you see this as the end of an era for Starbucks? I guess what's the bigger news here? Schultz stepping away and actually retiring officially, or the fact that they've added another board seat, which really signals even more focus on China?
Well, I think this wasn't too surprising. Once he stepped down as a CEO, we all expected that he would also step down from the board at some point. The question is that, historically when he has left, Starbucks hasn't performed very well. And so that's what, some of the nervousness is around. In the context of, the first quarter's, miss in a number of quarters, last quarter in terms of the U.S. comp. Now we have potentially a slowdown in China, so there's some risks there as well. And so the question now is, can the new CEO, Laxman, outperform expectations going forward?
Nick, if I look at, say, McDonald's over the last 4 years or so compared to Starbucks, It's just the chart looks a lot better. It's done, and it's sort of that, get your coffee and maybe food in that case option for a lot of people. It's on a lot of corners in America, certainly, and around the world. Is this just Starbucks was going so strong and it was getting a serious valuation boost before and that's reset? Or are there stronger options out there as far as how they've been performing lately?
Well, frankly, I think the one thing that's being underestimated around Starbucks is the value offering around food. And so I think there's, as food has grown as a percentage of sales, if you look at the price points there, they've actually done really well. I think that's part of the reason why we've seen positive transactions within the U.S. business, over the recent past. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get, positive transactions going forward. So, I'm actually, relatively optimistic that Starbucks will be fine. McDonald's has outperformed Starbucks in terms of fundamentals. So that's why you've seen the share price outperformance versus Starbucks, including with respect to transactions. But I wouldn't count Starbucks out either.